Great. Could you go to the next slide, please? So just want to begin by acknowledging country. As always, I think it's really important to remember that we are, everything we do is happening on stolen land if we're on this continent. So I'm personally zooming in from the unceded land of the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation right now. I'd like to recognise elders past and present and acknowledge any Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people here with us today. And just want to acknowledge that Indigenous people have been fighting and continue to fight tirelessly to protect this land and their connection to the environment, as well as their culture. And I want to pay tribute to that resistance and the ancestral knowledge that they have that continue to benefit us all, as well as the earth and other beings around us. Sovereignty was never ceded. This country was built on a genocide that is still ongoing. And really, we need land back in the stewardship of traditional owners, which will lead to us having a more climate resilient existence, I think, as well. So always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Next slide. Thanks, Vicky. So yeah, we're here today from the Act on Climate Collective. Vicky and I are both community organizers in the Act on Climate Collective. My name's India. My pronouns are she, her. And the reason that Act on Climate started working on climate adaptation, well, historically, we focused on getting emissions reductions target in Victoria, and they now have very strong ERTs. But then we realized that climate impacts are here and now. And while the government is leading on mitigation, they are really behind on adaptation. So in 2023, Act on Climate went on a West Coast listening tour, and they heard from a lot of people in the frontline communities that are already experiencing climate impacts. And they were telling people that they're worried about not feeling prepared enough for climate impacts, and that they didn't feel there was any, well, there is no any funding that's ongoing and permanent for adaptation projects. And they also said that there was not enough information or clarity around the Vic government's climate adaptation plans. They hadn't provided any updates around what's happening, where the implementation is at. So they've released their adaptation action plans, but they've got no sort of updates around what's going on with that, whose responsibility it is to implement things, and how things are progressing. And they were also saying that they want stronger action on adaptation. So a lot of the funding and focus at the moment is on disaster response as well as mitigation, but not really preparedness and making sure that people are safe before the climate impacts happen. So next slide. Thanks, Vicky. Yeah, after we heard that listening tour, we started looking into the Victorian adaptation policies and found that they were really lacking. Their implementation and funding of the adaptation action plans are haphazard, disparate, and inadequate. There's also no statewide climate risk assessment, which is climate change, risk assessment. Other states do have one, and they're also working on clear pathways to climate adaptation because of the outcomes of what happened in the risk assessment. There's a lack of transparency around the climate risks, and there's no public reporting on the adaptation progress, despite there being a monitoring, evaluation, reporting, and improvement framework that was established in 2018. There's also no whole of government position on any critical risks or the adaptation priorities. So the approach is really uncoordinated. No one's sure of whose responsibility it is to do what. And of course, that means there's no owners or delivery timelines for the specific actions. There's just stated that these things should happen, but no specifications around who should do it and when it should happen by. And this is all backed by limited funding to actually implement the things that they claim that they are going to do. Next slide. So after we discovered that the policy is really pretty disappointing. We started calling for adequate and ongoing funding for community-led climate adaptation. And we're asking the government to create a permanent and ongoing fund called the Victorian Community Climate Adaptation Fund, so that communities can apply for funding for the projects that they think are necessary and relevant to their communities. And so that, yeah, it can be ongoing and not just cut off year to year. We're also working with communities because we think that, the government is only one part of the equation. And while they have the resources, communities have the understanding and the knowledge that we need. So we're working to empower communities to envision and choose their own adaptation pathway and begin implementing it. We're doing this through going into communities and working with community members by facilitating community resilience mapping discussions, where we look at what a community's specific climate impacts are and how that relates to their strengths, those people that are most at risk in their community, and also any sort of gaps in their current approaches, which could lead to potential solutions, filling in those gaps. We also hold monthly calls with the Frontline Climate Alliance, Vic, that we set up. These adaptation activator calls happen on the first Thursday of the month, and they're really a collaborative space where we get together, share resources with other community members around Victoria that are working on climate resilience and climate adaptation in their communities. And we overcome, sort of bring any challenges we have and try and work through them together, and brainstorm ideas for visioning events or how to get the message out there about climate adaptation. We also, at the start of the year, held the first climate adaptation fair in Victoria, where we really focused on bringing together people from all around the state that have different knowledge on different types of adaptation projects. And there's a glitch happened to there we go. Different knowledge and sort of experiences around implementing different projects, really to try and push for collaboration and open knowledge sharing between each other. And to further on the importance of knowledge sharing and sharing resources, we've developed a climate adaptation map of all the sort of climate adaptation initiatives that are happening around the continent, so that people who are in, say, they look up their local town and want to see what's going on in their town. Is there anyone working on adaptation? Who can they join? So they can do that. Or they can also look at, okay, this town over here is also affected by flooding and they've started to implement this climate adaptation solution. Maybe I can get in touch with them or see what resources they've come up with and see if that process will work with my situation also. So I think I'm gonna hand over to Vicky to talk about what happened with the resilience inquiry and why we're all here now.
Thanks, India. Thank you so much for giving that overview of Act on Climate's work up till the inquiry and the ongoing work that we are doing. I'll start by giving a bit of a background to the resilience inquiry so that everyone's on the same page. So the inquiry was done by the Victorian government to look into the preparedness of communities around climate impacts and disasters. There's a public submission and hearing process. Those are both complete, and we're still waiting for the committee's report, which is due on the 30th of June. The inquiry was really focused on the climate risks to the built environment. So this is based on infrastructure that are in communities, but it also includes the impact this has on the people that use that infrastructure. And it does include green infrastructure, such as beaches and parks. So Act on Climate, we've had a very active role to play throughout the inquiry. You can see a picture there of one of our outreach stores in Laylaw. We really, in person and online, did a big push to ensure that a wide range of community members' voices were heard in the inquiry through encouraging submissions, as well as getting people to hearings and having actions outside hearings. So the actual report, it took many hours of reading, and it took many people in the collective to bring this report together. You can see a long list of contributors there. A lot of Act on Climate members were involved. It began with a lot of reading on long train journeys up to Newcastle, and one especially long one up to Lismore in New South Wales, and one bus journey back from Sydney, which wasn't as comfortable as the train journeys, reading on all the submissions. But we went through them, and it had a really big spreadsheet, and through manual word searches, we discovered, what was being covered in the submissions and what was, being said many times over in the submissions. So others in the collective or contributed to writing, proofreading, and designing this report. And it covers all the submissions that are available for public viewing. There are a few that we weren't able to view, which weren't, but it covers 240 submissions in total. So what's in the report? We've got a little table of contents to the right there. It uncovers the priorities around how climate adaptation can and should be achieved. We look at the climate impacts of most concerned. So these ones, it only looks at the submissions that did mention climate impacts that they were anxious about, and that's 205 of the submissions. And then we also looked at the solutions that were being put forward in submissions. And again, this was only submissions that did mention solutions, which was 196 of these submissions. So to make this a little bit interactive, we're going to be doing some poll questions. So shortly, one will pop up on your screen that India will get ready for us. So we're going to have, little polls pop up that are going to have us thinking about whether our answers align with the report results, and also if we can guess what people were more concerned about and the solutions that they were calling for. Of course, participation is optional, and it will only be up for about 5 to 10 seconds. So we're gonna, answer quickly. Shall we give the first one a go and see how it works out?
And don't stress, we're not going to be checking if you got it right. So it should come up on your screen now. There's 2 questions. So question number 1 has 4 options, sorry. And then if you scroll down, you can see question number 2. So I'll just give you 20 seconds to select what you think is the right answer. Then we'll see the results and see which one was right.
Let's see, we've got some answers coming in, which is great.
Yeah. All right, let's have a look. So the right answer is, drum roll please. So yeah, 39% of the submissions, I think it was 39.8 something percent, almost 40%, so close, mentioned our fund ask specifically, which was really exciting. It just goes to show how much work the collective put into getting it out there. And then top of mind for people most at risk, a lot of people are worried about the unequal effects of climate impacts, in societies that are not equitable. The risk does not equally, go across everyone in the same community. So it's really good to see that a lot of people in Victoria are concerned about and are thinking about the people that are most at risk. Oh, I didn't show you the correct answers. Sorry, everyone, but there you go. Now you can see the correct answer. So yeah, we had 74% of the submissions mentioned those most at risk.
Thanks, India. So we've got 2 more of those popping up in a second between each section that we're going to be talking about. And And yeah, and you were saying it was really heartwarming to see that a lot of people mentioned those most at risk in their community. And that was something that came out of it, that people are really concerned about others. So going on to some of the main priorities that came out. Number one was more funding, which was not surprising because there is, yeah, a desperate lack of funding for climate adaptation in Victoria. And it was a united call for funding as well. It was from, community members, councils, environmental organisations and other business organisations alike were all noting this need for more funding. So that really shows a very strong and united call for more funding of climate adaptation in Victoria. The second most mentioned was those most at risk and the need to have them safeguarded. The need for localised and community-led adaptation is also very well understood by the Victorian community. So that was also over 60% of submissions mentioned that. And then we've got ongoing funding, First Nations knowledge needing to be heeded. That's our Victorian Community Climate Adaptation Fund coming in there second last. And then polluters pay was also well covered. So yeah, there's also quite a good understanding that sourcing money to fund climate adaptation from the fossil fuel industry, which is responsible for these climate impacts, is something that we should be doing. Yeah, so yeah, with the ongoing funding, it was, clear that people also know that these competitive once-off grants, they are not working. They're not providing enough funding, and then also not providing the consistency that is needed for these projects year on year to build them up and to continue them. So yeah, this just covers a lot of what I have already mentioned. We've got in the corner there, I set out community resilience mapping up in East Gippsland. And this is one of the ways that we've been really making sure that those most at risk, as well as localised climate adaptation, is being talked about in communities as well as actioned. And of course, as with everything we do, it's really important that it's Indigenous led, Indigenous voices are listened to, and Indigenous knowledge is implemented, because there is such rich historic experiences that we can learn from.
All right, no, back. And you didn't see that.
Sneak preview.
So we're ready for our next quiz. So this time we're looking at the impacts, the solutions, sorry, that people mentioned. So the question is, which of these solutions here, and there's 1, 2, 3, 6 options, which one do you think was the one that was least mentioned in the submissions? So you got local food production, retrofitting and building upgrades, energy security solutions, improved warning systems, restoration or protection of ecosystems, and education and training. So I'll just give 15 more seconds to...
I think some people did see the sneak preview. Or they've read the report already, which would make me very happy.
Yes. All right, just 5 more seconds. And we'll end it now. Share the results. And this time I've already ticked show correct answers. So yeah, surprisingly, improved warning systems was the least mentioned. So a few people already figured that out or just happened to have a good guess. Yeah, which was interesting. I mean, I suppose it makes sense. It was, about climate adaptation in regards to infrastructure, but still interesting because it sounds like that's an important part of adaptation for sure. All right, Vicky, I'll let you talk about the solutions.
Thanks, India. Yes, so this is the chart showing the it should have been the impact of
Yeah,
concern.
I
Right,
think
that's fine.
I
We
think
will sneak to solutions first.
there we go.
So a wide range of solutions were called for, with, as we found out, improved warning systems, the least mentioned, and building standards and planning policies, the most mentioned, which does make sense with it being an infrastructure, looking at infrastructure and ensuring that there are standards and policies in place when we're building new infrastructure is a massive piece of the puzzle that we do need to have in place, because we want to make sure that anything new that's being built is being built to withstand locked-in climate impacts. Education and training came in second, which is something that people are really shows that people are either themselves not feeling as well educated or aware as they could be on the risks and solutions to their communities, or that they feel that others in their community are not, ready for the climate impacts that are incoming. Retrofitting and green infrastructure also very high up. And then it's also people also really showing what they want the government to do and what they want the government's role to be. People were quite clear that they want the government to really provide consistent and up-to-date data on what the risks are. And that was something that we were hearing from community as well when we were on our listening tour. And that they really want the state to play a supportive and coordinating role, ensuring that, there are clear responsibilities and that they are supporting communities through things such as providing funding. But yeah, they still want the community to be leading on these solutions. And it was also great to see that nearly a third of submissions, ensuring that rentals are made safe, was mentioned. So while, as we already talked about, people are really worried about those most at risk, and renters came out as some of those most at risk that are really top of people's minds. The fact that, they are living in places that are not safe for them to live. And with the solutions, just to note that it's really important that we contextualize these results, because the solutions called for will be based on the context, such as the location of the submitter. So we shouldn't take these, solutions as, the most preferred solutions by all communities in Victoria of what they want, because context, of the local risks and what locals want is really important.
Okay, before we go,
Next, I will go back. Yes, impacts.
yes. So this one is not a quiz. It's just a poll to get people's get an idea of what people are concerned about. So we've put in the 15 different climate impacts that were mentioned as what people were concerned about in their submissions. So just select one. You'll have to scroll down because there's quite a few. Obviously, everyone's concerned about multiple things, but first one that comes to mind as being what you are concerned about with climate impacts. We'll just leave 5 more seconds. Cool. So we can see people in the chat are most concerned about the loss of biodiversity. Oh, sorry, you can't see that yet. Let's forget to press that. Loss of biodiversity. And then second in this Zoom call, people are concerned about heat. And third, people are concerned about mental health. So let's have a look at what the submissions, what concerns people most in those submissions.
Thanks, India. Yeah, so heat was definitely right up there at the top. So yeah, again, we said top of mind because we feel that this is really a snapshot of what is top of mind for people at the time of the report, of what they were most concerned about. Of course, it was, over summer, so heat and bushfires would have been top of mind. And we have had some pretty awful floods recently, so floods are also really on people's minds. Human and physical human health and mental health were, both really high up as well. And also thought it was very interesting, the things that weren't top of mind for people, such as cost of living, food security, displacement, and communication loss. There's a lot of impacted places. Really, communication loss is of a big concern. So people aren't really realizing that as one of their top, concerns yet. And food security is also one that I personally am quite concerned about. That, is not that high up in the impacts of concern. So these are both the primary and secondary climate impacts that were top of mind. So heat, floods and fires, as the big climate disasters were top of mind for most people. And power outage was the secondary impact that was most mentioned. And then the ones that weren't as prevalent were those that, I just talked about: the food insecurity, the communication loss, cost of living, and displacement. And we've talked about solutions, so I'll just hop through those. So how can we use this report to increase just adaptation? Because as we've heard, people really want to see just adaptation things like funding for communities. They want it to be community-led. They want to make sure that those most at risk are being kept safe. So we've got a couple of ways that you could use this report. You can email your state MP. You can call or meet them in person at their office. You can just drop it off at their office as well. We do have a printable booklet that you can access in a folder. India will share some links in the chat for everyone. We've got a briefing document which kind of really goes through how you can call and meet your state MP. It's got an email and calling template that you can use, as well as some posters, pledge posters that you can print out and take to your MPs to ask them to hold up. And of course, if you do any of this, we would really love to see some photos. And if you need help with doing any of this, we are very happy to take your call or email and help you at any stage. At the end of the call, we'll be sharing our contact details with you all. And then something else that we're really hoping this report can do is to generate discussion in communities, where you really start talking to your community members and local organizations and councils about which of these solutions that people have put forward are locally relevant. We need to get these conversations started and really start thinking about what we can be implementing in our communities to be ready for the impacts.